All right, everyone, the Uniparty is desperate as we look at this Colorado case, trying to keep Trump off the ballot because more insurrection. That trial is in the end likely to go nowhere. I can't understand how it could conceivably be argued that a person who hasn't been found guilty of insurrection, sedition, etc., could be disqualified from ballot access under the understanding that some people in the public think that they're guilty of such things. These are legal terms. And upon appeal, let's say the Colorado case goes in favor of the plaintiffs, they successfully get Trump off the ballot. It'll be appealed immediately, a stay will be issued on that decision, and a higher court will overturn it. That's my expectation. That's assuming that it even gets that far. It could just be that if the case gets shot down, they could dismiss it out of hand at this point, because there is no case. And I discussed this yesterday in brief. Numerous people were sending super chats about my opinion of this particular thing. Do I think that they'll be successful? Do I think that it's even constitutional? The answer is no and no. It's quite clearly unlawful for them to keep him off the ballot when he hasn't been found guilty of any crime. None of the crimes he's charged with would disqualify him even if he were found guilty. Fraud is not sedition. He's charged with business fraud in the Bragg case. Presidential Records Act violations. Again, that's not insurrection and it's not sedition. That's the Jack Smith case. More fraud charges, etc., coming from Fulton County or from Letitia James in New York. None of these charges are insurrection. They're not really related to J6. Presidential records, okay, that has nothing to do with it. Business fraud stemming back years, that has nothing to do with it. Including with, over-evaluation of the Mar-a-Lago's value. Yes, it's worth $10 million less than a much smaller property that's 2 blocks away. I believe that completely. It makes a whole lot of sense. By the way, in that case, I don't think it's going anywhere. It's simply retaliatory. Letitia James promised to do what she's doing now. She doesn't even care if she's successful. She'll always boil it down to a bunch of racists in the jury in the end if she's unsuccessful at prosecuting. And probably will. What do any of these cases have to even do with the insurrection thing that the claim is that it's an insurrection, which it isn't even that. It was a riot, and mainly it was a protest that devolved into a riot partially. That's what J6 is. First, in order to make the case stick, under a proper understanding of the specific ordinance with regards to insurrectionists, etc., people who have rebelled against the United States or aided and comforted its enemies not being able to hold office. First, you have to establish there was an actual insurrection, but that hasn't been legally established. You have a handful of individuals from J6 that were more organized and so forth that did apparently intend to impede the political process, and they've gotten charged with things similar to that. That would fall into the category. But 99% of the charges are misdemeanors, things like vandalism, simple trespass, or they've been artificially upgraded to felonies, but again, they fall far short. Destruction of public property is not an insurrection. The fact that it happened to be in the U.S. Capitol at the time does not mean that the average person at J6 intended to overthrow the government. A small number of people there were delusional enough to think that such a thing was taking place. Most of them knew better. They were part of a riot. It's just a riot. Politically motivated riot is still just a riot. It doesn't mean that you intended to literally overhaul and seize the entire U.S. government or something like that. So that's number one. You haven't proven there's even an insurrection. Secondly, you would have to prove that Trump caused it materially. That he supported, condoned, and caused it. There would have to be his particular involvement. But he wasn't even there at the time. He was miles away, that's number one, became aware of it, fairly quickly rebuked the people that were involved and said stand down. He did not say anything at his rally and speech prior to this riot that could be conceived of as encouraging them in their behavior, that could possibly be labeled incitement. So the case falls through on those aspects. First, you have to prove, the use of the term insurrection is actually a coherent one, and then you have to prove Trump's particular involvement. You can't, for example, you've got commentators online. You've got a commentator online who chuckles about J6 and says, it was hilarious. but they're not there at the events, and they haven't incited anyone to go to them or anything like that. They're just commenting on it during and after the fact and saying that they support the basic premise of the rioters that are there. Can you charge them with sedition? No. Will they be charged with sedition? Well, possibly, because of the out-of-control so-called justice system being used in an illegal and retaliatory manner and completely falling apart at the moment, which is just another symbol of the wonderful leadership of one Joe Biden, his ability to put together such a well-oiled machine U.S. government. I mean, you can, but the charges are not going to stick. Typically, by the way, in these cases, when they're launching major charges at people, they're pleading to lesser includeds and stuff like that as part of plea deals. This is, by the way the justice system works normally. Normally, they top-load charges if they can, and then they scare the person with the prospect of possibly going to prison for 20 years on major charges and having to pay tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend themselves whether they win or not. And then you say, but I think that you're okay. I realize that you're not actually bad. Did you seem repentant? Just plead to a couple of these lesser includeds. You spend a month in jail. You don't go to prison. You're not a felon. You can still vote and own a weapon and stuff. We'll get a misdemeanor level fine. You pay a few $1,000s. Instead of paying the lawyer 50 grand, you pay us 5 grand. Doesn't that sound like a swell deal compared to the possibility of spending most of the rest of your life in prison? And losing everything, and being unable to own a gun, unable to vote, marked for life? Yeah, we'll even seal the record after it's done. Well, I'm confident. I know that you're on terrorism charges and stuff, but I'm confident you won't do it again. So just say you won't do it again, have your lawyers agree to the plea deal, sign this little paper, go before the judge, plead guilty, write an apology, humiliate and degrade yourself. That's also a part of many of these charges you will see. And then, we'll even ask for a suspended sentence. Fuck it, we won't even put you in jail. Just don't do anything wrong for the next 120 days and you're scot-free. That's the kind of thing that they're doing. It's lawfare. It's a political punishment for people who are dissidents. Most of these people have not committed any conceivable major crime. They're not violent individuals. They didn't try to overthrow the government, etc. Donald Trump was even less involved. He was not even physically there. I have listened to his entire speech. There is no way to interpret it other than telling people to engage in a completely peaceful protest march. Well, protest march, if I organize a rally and the rally gets violent, they're not going to be able to do anything to me in a retaliatory manner unless the legal system is having problems, like it currently is with Trump and the J6 defendants. By the way, some of them are still in solitary confinement under nonviolent charges, you'll note, simply because somebody else at the event caused it to become a riot. I didn't tell them to do jack shit. I told them to march down the street from point A to point B, shouting slogans and carrying signs. The fact that somebody there happens to have brought a club and started beating on the cops, and then people fell in once the cops are attacking them and they're attacking the cops, the fact that it devolved into a riot does not speak to my particular inclusion in that. If I just sit at the podium, I watch them go by, and then I drive off, how the fuck am I responsible? So the Colorado case is bullshit. The fact that they're even entertaining it long enough to actually have proceedings is I have to shrug my shoulders in bewilderment at that point. There's no point to it. You're not going to win. I guess they're hoping that they'll be able to do this for shenanigan purposes, because clearly they're worried about Trump. It's a desperate move. They wouldn't be this obvious about what they're doing, charging Trump with everything under the sun in 4 different courts, trying to remove ballot access, going all in against J6 defendants, etc., cracking down online, algorithmic demotion, censorship, propaganda, the whole 9 yards. They wouldn't be doing this unless they were worried. They prefer to be more subtle. A little propaganda, a little persecution here and there. Maybe once in a while we have a Ruby Ridge or something like that. They don't really like to go all in, but they've been forced to. That actually is a good thing. That's about all. Peace out.